You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning. The news behind the headlines.
A couple of episodes ago, I started a series called Understanding White Supremacy Through the Eyes of a Jim Crow Sharecropper Baby Boomer. That's me. I was born Jim Crow, and I lived and existed as a sharecropper with my father, and I'm also a baby boomer. When the war was over with, my mother got pregnant, as a billion other women got pregnant when those men came home from those long details and assignments overseas fighting World War II. I'm a baby boomer. And what I did in my first two attempts was try to explain why I understand the dwindling population of white men, the increased and unprecedented deaths of white men who have less than a college education, who are, if you will, working class whites with high school education, why they're dying in such great numbers, and the almost unprecedented, unbelievable statement about white people's mortality today in a nation like America, where the mortality rate, people are expected to live great lives because of the great medical facilities and all of the safety nets that we have. But white men are dying faster than men in third world countries. White men in America across Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Ohio, Indiana, Montana, South Dakota are dying. White men between the ages of 45 and 55 are dying faster than men in Haiti or in Ghana or in some other impoverished nations around the world, or even in Islamic nations, third world nations. White men are dying. It is an off-the-chart scientific fact that we have demonstrated in our first two presentations that we don't need to demonstrate now. And so I understand these men because I grew up Jim Crow. I also understand them because they are the children of baby boomers. Their fathers are my age. But this group also is the core base of Tribulation Trump, his support. It is the base that supports him, and because of who they are, they bring their wives and their children, and they bring their parents to this group. For instance, you can take a person like Waverly Marsh. I would assume that Waverly Marsh would be in that category, somewhere about 40 years old or 45, somewhere thereabouts, and that his father would be along with me as a baby boomer. I don't know that about Waverly, and Waverly, if I'm wrong, and you understand. But men in Waverly Marsh's category, I believe, are dying, that support Trump, rather, are dying faster than men in Haiti down there with Pastor Salir at his Assemblies of God Church there in Port-au-Prince. It's unbelievable. So I tried to explain, I tried to say in my first, I understand that process. Let me say something to you about my growing up when my father couldn't vote. My mama couldn't vote. If we were thirsty, we couldn't drink water in town. Because there were now in some parts of the South, they did have colored water fountains and white water fountains. In a little town I grew up in, there were no separate water fountains. There was just, you could go to the drugstore and ask for a glass of water if you were white, or a restaurant, or Woolworths. But if you were black, like me, you had to wait till you got home and pump the water from the pump. Now in other towns there were no, ultimately in a town called Lumberton, I drank from, and Fayetteville, I drank from a colored water fountain. In Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is about 29 miles northeast of where I was raised, is a street called Hay Street. And in Hay Street, there's a roundabout traffic area. And in that roundabout traffic area, many moons earlier, was the place where slaves were brought in, the area of Jacksonville, in Jamestown in Virginia and transferred down to Fayetteville to Hay Street, and slaves were sold there day and night. It's one of the most historical slave trading places in the South. Hay Street, slave trading place there in Fayetteville, North Carolina, 29 miles from where I grew up. Hay Street. And the other irony of that is that my father, Lawrence Manning, not my stepfather who raised me, Willie Patterson, my father worked for the Prince Charles Hotel 5 blocks south of the slave trading place, same street on Hay Street. I plan to go visit my sister soon. I'm not sure if my sister Delphia, she's calling me every day. And I plan to go visit her. She's in the hospital there now in Fayetteville, and I plan to stay at the Prince Charles Hotel on Hay Street. And I grew up where they have now memorialized that street, that roundabout there in Fayetteville, North Carolina. But let me also say this to you, that I remember when I was just a boy, and I'm not sure what my age was, but I'll give Deborah Carter the 9-year-old treatment. One day my sister and I, her name was Barbara Jean, and my other sister Linda, we were waiting for the bus to take us to school. It was a little town. We lived, there was a secondary road. That means the road was paved with white lines to demarcate traffic going in each direction, right? Then all other roads around us were dirt roads. We lived in a house way back up in the woods, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a mile from the secondary road. So we had to walk from our house to that secondary road. That's the road that the bus drove on. So one day, in a little place between a place in North Carolina called Bowie, North Carolina, B-U-I-E, and Philadelphia, North Carolina. Now, Philadelphia was just a small town with a white school, 3-story building. I'd never seen anything like that in North Carolina. And a little fishing cannery around a lake there, and a few houses and a general store. It was no big town, it's called Philadelphia. And on that road from Philadelphia to Bowie is where we lived and where we caught the bus. And one day, we were waiting for the bus to come pick us up one morning, my sister and I. And I picked, and Mr. McDonald or Mr. McDougal, I don't remember exactly he was a MacDougal, a McDonald. He was some kind of Irish, whatever he was. And he drove by in his pickup truck. And I picked up a rock and threw it at his truck. Now, he was our overseer. We lived on his land. He owned the house that we lived in. We didn't even have, we didn't pay, he owned the house. It was his house. We picked his cotton. And he drove by at 9 years old. I picked up a rock and threw the rock and hit his truck. He stopped on the little on secondary road, right? He'd go maybe, 40, 50 feet away from us, and he stopped and he backed up. And, I'm standing there with my sisters. I'm thinking he's gonna get out and do something to me, right? He's a white man. I think he may look like he's about 70, 80 years old. Very old for me at that time. And he looked out the window at me and looked at my son. We're standing right there. He didn't know what he's going to do, right? I don't know what he's going to do. But I hit that truck with that rock. And then he put the truck back in gear and he drove off. And so I thought, well, that's the end of it, right? Why I threw the rock, I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure why I threw that rock. I'm not sure if I threw that rock because I disliked him. And I don't think that was, I didn't like him. I had no but I don't know that I disliked him. I don't know if I threw it because I was being radical. I don't know if I was throwing it because I was, protesting being black. That was not my spirit at the time. But something just got in me that day, and I picked up that rock and threw it at that white man and hit his truck. So I thought everything was over, went to school, did everything I did at school, and came back home. And then my daddy came home and said, boy, what you did today? I said, what are you talking about? And he took a shoe. Now, my dad used to like to beat with shoes. I don't know why. He would take his shoes. My dad, Willie Pastor, used to wear two-tone shoes, white and black, brown and white. All his shoes were two-tone. You ever see these two-tone shoes? Sometimes I wear them. He took one of his shoes and grabbed me by the back of my neck. And he tore my butt up and my back with that shoe. I mean, putting shoe leather on me. Like he was stomping me with that shoe for throwing a rock at that white man's church, a truck. You know, I don't think I threw it because of hatred. Yeah, that's like the exact same shoe. That looked like the shoe my daddy beat me with. He used to like to wear them kind of shoes. He was a sporty kind of guy, Willie Patterson was. Anyway, but I'm trying to say to you that I'm coming from a perspective. I've lived long enough. Is that Philadelphia? I've lived long enough. Oh, it's the roundabout there on Hay Street. Yeah, it is. It is. It is right there. They sold more slaves at that place than you can shake a stick at. And my father, Lawrence Manning, worked at this. And we all went there, high school. It's a historical site now. They used to sell. That's a slave market right there. That place is only 29 miles away from where I spent most of the first 18 years of my life. Looks a little bit more modern now, even the time when I was there. I guess they cleared the traffic. And then down Hay Street going west was the Prince Charles Hotel where my father, Lawrence Manning, worked as a bellboy. He used to wear one of those monkey suits and take people's baggage, white people's baggage, because just 7 miles east of where that place is that you saw there on Hay Street is Fort Bragg, which is one of the largest military stations in America. It houses the 82nd Airborne Division, Fort Bragg. And because it's such a major place, Fort Bragg is, and it houses the 82nd Airborne Division and the Screaming Eagles, that generals would come from all over the world, and they would live there, or they would come there. They would plan military strategies there at Fort Bragg, and they would, Special Operation Home of the Airborne. It is a mega fort. Fort Bragg is. And I only live 27 miles or 23 miles from Fort Bragg. So, it was a place that, I think that's the Prince Charles Hotel where my father worked. Lawrence Mann, he worked at the Prince Charles. He was a bellhop. Everybody else during those years had to do sharecropping. My father, and that's how my mother met him there at the Prince Charles. He was a young man with a red suit on and a monkey hat, picking up people's back at this exclusive hotel. And the generals would stay, rather than staying on base at Fort Bragg, they stay in the hotel with their wives or with their girlfriends at a fancy restaurant. I plan to visit it when I go back to North Carolina to see my sister. I'm trying to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. Recently, I tried to bring white folk and black folk together at a place called Gettysburg. Sometimes I think about myself as a barefoot boy, and I'm looking at these white supremacists, I'm looking at Tribulation Trump, and I'm looking at some of the white people that I used to deal with. I'm looking at this racism in America, and I'm looking at the failure of many black people, and what I've said about Obama, and the failure of Americans to be able to rise and unite. I don't think anybody has had a unity meeting as significant as the Gettysburg. I know there have been all kinds of meetings, Martin Luther King's March on Washington, but Gettysburg was a premier place of unity at the core and the hurt and the pain of America in the Civil War, one of the greatest killing fields ever. I tried to bring white people and black people together, and nobody came. Well, a few people came. But for the most part, they wouldn't come because they didn't want unity. And even some of the people that did come that were white now, when they saw Trump, they dumped my wisdom. They kicked me to the curb. They kicked my wisdom that brought them to Gettysburg. They've kicked my wisdom to the curb, and they now have wholeheartedly, hook, line, and sinker, given their lives completely as white supremacists to this public degenerate Tribulation Trump. And I'm here to make the point of my picking cotton, my not being able to drink water in town if I got thirsty. Let me say this to you. When you see me reaching out to white people and doing it with the Spirit of Jesus, you don't know how incredible that is or was. Dr. King or somebody else can reach out to white folk. But you don't. Listen, let me say something. Let me say this to you, that for me to go to Gettysburg I'm throwing that rock at that man's truck and my daddy tearing my behind up. But for me, see, when we went to town to shop at the supermarket, right? At Oldham Supermarket to buy food, whatever we're gonna buy, salt and sugar. If I had to go to the bathroom, there was no place for me to go to the bathroom. I had to wait till I got home. And the reason being is that what the white people were pushing during those years is that somehow or another, me and my kind were too unclean to go into their bathrooms. That if we went into their bathroom, we would leave it diseased. That was the mindset. Now, I didn't believe that about myself, and I don't think my dad and my father, my mother and my sister, I don't believe they believed it. And I know that my uncles and aunts, that they didn't believe it either, but that is what they were pushing. Y'all can't go to our bathrooms because you're too unclean. Y'all can't drink from our water fountains. Y'all can't drink from the same place we drink. You can't sit down and eat at the same Woolworth lunch counter that we sit down because you are too unclean. You will leave the stool and the counter diseased if you sit down and eat where we sit down and eat. So you have to go to another place. That's how I grew up. That was the environment that shaped my thinking. I survived it. I survived it. I don't know survived it, but I conquered it. And I call people to Gettysburg. And I conquered it by realizing that people are just people everywhere. You know, yeah. And so I made an attempt to try to bring folk together. Black folk have their problems. White folk got their problems. But now we have a divider in chief named Tribulation Trump. And he has, if I can go back, he has found that something that God has done and God is doing. God, now don't get angry, just listen to me, is killing white people. He's killing them. And white men in particular. You don't have to get angry with me. Just be cerebral enough to know that if I grew up where people thought I was too unclean to drink from the same water fountain, or I was too unclean to sit down on the stool because I leave diseases on the stool or diseases on the lunch counter, but I overcame it to call my brother to Gettysburg to say, let's love one another. If you can just understand that, God is killing white people. And it is not just about racism or slavery in America. It's because we're in the tribulation. And their day has come. The anger and the wrath of God is kindled against white people. And the reason why I want to point out it is about slavery, about racism in particular, because God could simply use Dr. King's Civil Rights March to solve that problem. It didn't. The problem goes way beyond slaves getting on board a ship in Ghana and sailing to Jamestown or Charleston, South Carolina. The problem with Japheth and white people goes far back beyond Africa and slavery or even the founding of America. It goes back to the days of Noah with Japheth, Ham, and Shem. It goes back to those days and it's prophesied. Japheth being the man from the land with winter. God's going to kill him. God's going to kill him. God's going to kill him. Now, in my next episode, I'm going to discuss the liberal, college-educated, upper echelon, well-to-do Japheth or white people that are not dying at this instance. I'll give a distinction, demarcation about that. But again, going back to understanding white supremacy. White supremacy cannot be solved by white people banding together and saying Jews will not replace us or choosing a degenerate, a public boogie, which is a collection of dust and dirt in your nostrils as the hairs catch it, and as so much of it happens and some of the mucus from your nose gets on that dirt and that dust in your nose, we call it a boogie. I know that's an ugly word, but that's what tribulation Trump is. If not that, a public degenerate or a boogie eater. And these people are following him. Why? Because he has found that they need to have a ban placed on Muslims. Stop Muslims from coming into America. Stop the immigration. Immigration in America is the number one agenda for Trump, of stopping immigration, and for the white supremacists. Not building roads, not health care, not any of the things that you would think an American president would be about, building stronger relations, a nuclear. The immigration is all we hear about with Trump. And his major thing with immigration is build that wall in Mexico, stop them brown people, stop them baby-making Mexicans from coming into America, because white people are going into extinction. But you see, the problem is God's already in America and the prophecy is already in. The die has been cast. You can have Trump and any other body you want to have as president, you white supremacist people. God's going to kill every last one of y'all. He's going to kill you. He's going to kill all of you. He's going to kill all you Trump supporters. God's going to kill every last one of you, not because of racism, but because of prophecy of the tribulation. He's going to kill you. And you're dying. And you think that by putting up a border, you can keep God out of America. You think by putting up a wall on the border of America, you can keep God outside by putting up a wall. You can't keep God out by putting up a wall. And you can't keep God out by putting a ban on Muslims. You can't keep God and his great killing machine of white people out. One will argue, Pastor Man and I know you're arguing, you were mad with that man, Mr. McDougal or McDonald or whoever he was that you threw that rock at, and your daddy tearing you behind for doing so. You know, my father was right, you know. I heard sometime earlier, that, you know, when you do a crime, it's like throwing a brick at the jailhouse, because they're going to get you. I threw my first rock at racism and my own development as a preacher and the man that I am today. I threw my first rock when I was 9 years old. I'm going to keep on. Right now I'm throwing the word of God. White people, you can do all you want. You can vote, you can lie, you can scheme, you can hate, you can do whatever you want, but you can't stop the prophecy of God. God's killing y'all. And your women aren't having babies, and your women aren't interested in having sex with y'all. God is killing y'all. And that's just how that is. I'm the messenger of the Lord that threw that rock years ago, that grew up under such conditions. I'm the Lord's servant, and hallelujah goes right there. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.